Good evening, film enthusiasts, and welcome to another episode of the Indie Film Network. I'm your host, Devon J Williams, and tonight we have a truly special guest joining us, visionary filmmaker J.D. Ellenberger, the creative force behind the haunting psychological thriller Lachrymose Primrose. Tonight's journey will take us deep into the mind of an independent filmmaker at the height of his creative powers. We'll begin with my review of this film that's been captivating audiences on the festival circuit, followed by a proper introduction to JD's remarkable career. Then we'll take a short break while we prepare to welcome JD himself for an in-depth conversation about the making of Lachrymose Primrose, his creative process, and the future of his distinctive vision. So without further ado, let's dive into this extraordinary cinematic experience. This is my film review for Lachrymose Primrose. Lachrymose Primrose is a hauntingly immersive psychological thriller that draws viewers into the fractured mind of a man consumed by grief and loss. Director J.D. Ellenberger crafts a nightmarish descent into madness that evokes the psychological tension of Alfred Hitchcock during the peak of his career and the disorienting horror of Kubrick's The Shining. The film follows Caleb McCallum, a once successful author whose life unravels following a devastating personal tragedy. Through visual storytelling and discordant nostalgic sound design that throws us into an atmosphere comparable to classic horror films from the early to mid-1900s, Ellenberger places us directly inside Caleb's deteriorating psyche, where reality and delusion blur into a single terrifying experience. Tedd Bodnar delivers a raw, unflinching performance as Caleb, capturing both the character's explosive rage and quiet desperation with equal conviction. The supporting cast, particularly Michelle Mullins as Elizabeth, and the ethereal presence of Chloe Roos, create a powerful emotional foundation that grounds the film's more surreal elements. What elevates Lachrymose Primrose beyond typical psychological horror is Ellenberger's poetic visual language. Recurrent motifs of flower petals, reflections, and haunting apparitions create a dreamlike atmosphere that's both beautiful and deeply unsettling. The film's period setting, complete with vintage typewriters and rotary phones, adds another layer of disorientation and nostalgic dread. The narrative unfolds like a puzzle box, with each revelation casting previous scenes in new light. Ellenberger masterfully plays with audience perception, leaving us questioning what's real and what exists only in Caleb's fractured consciousness. The film's shocking twists arrive not merely as plot devices, but as emotional gut punches that recontextualize everything we witnessed. Lachrymose Primrose is a bold, uncompromising vision from a filmmaker unafraid to challenge viewers. It's a meditation on grief, guilt, and the destructive power of unprocessed trauma that will linger in your thoughts long after the credits roll. This is independent filmmaking at its most daring and personal, a reminder of cinema's power to disturb, move, and transform. Now, before we bring on our special guest, let me share more about the remarkable journey of J.D. Ellenberger. J.D. Ellenberger is an Irish-American director whose artistic journey embodies the very essence of independent filmmaking. Beginning his career in 2010 under the moniker Johnny Daggers, JD has forged his own path through the industry with unwavering determination and a distinctive artistic vision. His filmmaking journey began with the award-winning short Samhain Night Feast, which caught the attention of legendary director George Romero, who personally gave JD his blessing for future projects. After navigating the challenges that often plague independent productions, including his feature Caustic Zombies and the animated project Mo Anam Cara, JD found his breakthrough with Blood on the Reel, which earned him his first major distribution deal with SGL Entertainment. In 2019, JD's artistic evolution continued with Noctambulist, a stunning homage to early 20th century silent films that received worldwide distribution and selection at the prestigious Worldcon 75 International Film Festival in Helsinki. This marked a turning point in his career, where he discovered his true artistic voice. Lachrymose Primrose represents his most personal and ambitious project yet. Created during the height of the pandemic with a skeleton crew, JD transformed his own home into the film set while personally handling cinematography, lighting, and editing. This labor of love has garnered significant acclaim, winning at the Alls International Indie Film Festival, the Strange Days International Film Festival, receiving an honorable mention at the LA Indie Horror Film Festival, and being featured in both Rue Morgue and Sinister magazines. Now, we'll be right back with JD Ellenberger after this short break. I'll temporarily turn off my webcam, and when we return, we'll dive deep into the haunted world of Lachrymose Primrose. We are back, and joining me now is J.D. Ellenberger. J.D., thank you so much for being on with us tonight and on the Indie Film Network. Lachrymose Primrose. Am I saying that correctly, first and foremost?
How did you pronounce it?
I'm saying Lachrymose Primrose, but I'm kind of stuck in that pronunciation.
Yeah, Lachrymose Primrose, but you're not the only person.
Okay. Lachrymose Primrose? Primrose. Okay, perfect. Lachrymose Primrose is a truly powerful experience, and I'm really excited to dive deep into your creative process.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So before we dive into specific aspects of Lachrymose Primrose, I want to be mindful that this film contains some powerful twists that are best experienced firsthand. Now, could you share how you'd like us to discuss the film today without diminishing that impact to our potential viewers?
It's just a really dark psychological thriller that revolves around one man's descent into madness. Anybody that's followed my films over the years knows that they all have some type of psychological element to them. I've just always been fascinated with the human psyche, and what causes somebody to spiral out of control. And in this case, with Lachrymose Primrose, the one thing that I really liked about this story is how something very mundane, something as simple as a man's flowers dying, can just completely send him over the edge.
Okay.
Now, of course, there are some underlying ties with those flowers to his daughter, who unfortunately passed away, and so these flowers were his last remaining connection to his daughter. And so as those flowers died, that was his last hope to cling on to. So
yeah, I noticed that significance in that. From my viewing of Lachrymose Primrose, I interpreted it as exploring the disintegration of a man's sanity after profound loss. Now, is this how you envisioned the core of the story, and what personal experiences or observations drove you to explore grief in such a visceral, psychological way?
I think that if anybody watched my silent 1920s homage Noctambulist that came out, I believe 2015, somewhere around there, similar, obviously different stories, but both exploring the human psyche, and that's just something that I always revisit. It's write what you know, and that has literally been my style of writing since I first discovered Edgar Allan Poe when I was 10. I read The Black Cat, and ever since then, I've always been writing psychological stories, poems. Even in high school, I was blessed to go to a really wonderful high school that offered many advanced English literature classes and loaded up on everything. My senior year, I only needed, I think, 3 more credits to graduate, so the majority of my classes were all extracurricular. Just take what you want, and I loaded up on every lit class that I could possibly take, and my style of writing is always the same. Now, fast forward many years to 2009, when I accidentally fell into the world of cinema. I wasn't really sure of the direction that I wanted to go. I kind of abandoned my writing style for 20 plus years, and it just wasn't me. It wasn't me. I was trying to write campier, more, and even though I love trauma or films like Street Trash, my initial beginnings, especially with the film Caustic Zombies back in 2010, that just wasn't me. That wasn't my style of writing, and I really had to have a really deep introspection with myself and just remind myself to go back to the type of writer that I've always been since my childhood. And that's psychological thriller, so always being obsessed with the human psyche. And I think that's, for me, honestly, that's the most terrifying aspect of anything. I don't really like a lot of visceral images, a lot of guts, and a lot of gore. It's fine in small doses, but I'm a firm believer that our minds can create horrors far more horrific than anything that somebody can visually show you on screen, because it's subjective.
Exactly.
If I give you a terrifying scenario, your mind's going to interpret it one way, whereas my mind's going to completely interpret it another way. So.
Exactly. Okay. All right. That's great. So now the title, Lachrymose Primrose, is quite evocative and symbolic. What does it represent to you, and how does it encapsulate the themes you're exploring in the film? How did you come up with the title of Lachrymose Primrose?
Well, Lachrymose Primrose was initially a short story. It was probably a 6-page short story that I had written just for a future volume, a collection of short stories. And I was actually going to be filming another movie that had probably 20-some locations with extras. It probably had over 100 actors. And then the pandemic hit.
Okay.
And everything was shut down. Yeah. So I had to backpedal a little bit, and I went back to some of my scripts, went back to some of my stories. I had always loved Lachrymose. For the key points that I had mentioned, just something really mundane, sending a man over the edge. And I thought that was a great story to explore. I also liked the fact that because we were in the pandemic, that I was able to convert my home into an entire movie set. So every single room was completely redecorated for the movie. My good friend of 35 years, Phil Lear, flew out from Colorado, redid all the kitchen cabinets, put new flooring in, painted the walls. completely made the house exactly how we wanted it to be. And then I thought back to, some of my favorite films that really only involve minimal characters. Obviously, if you look at The Shining, very minimal cast. The majority of it takes place in the Stanley Hotel. You look at Misery, the majority of while there are other characters, the majority of it's between Kathy Bates and James Caan in one bedroom. Movies like The Mist that primarily take place
so good.
These are some of my favorites. I just thought, wow, they really off very few locations. One primary location and then maybe just a few others. But and so we were able to make it work throughout the pandemic. I digressed a bit as far as the title goes. When I view anything, as I mentioned, I fell into the world of cinema. I've always been a writer my entire life, as mentioned. Yeah. So anytime that I write, especially for Caleb, because Caleb was an author, and so I like to show the dichotomy and the juxtaposition between when Caleb's in writer mode and he's very poetic and he's a very talented wordsmith, as opposed to when we see him after he starts to spiral and he turns into this very gruff, rough-spoken individual that's quite profane. So it just shows the juxtaposition between the two sides of Caleb. So I knew that I wanted the title of the film to also be very poetic. And, Lachrymose means sadness. And so, the sad flower, I mean, that's pretty much layman's terms for the title, which makes perfect sense. And so Lachrymose just gave it that very poetic twist because Lachrymose Primrose just has that nice rhyming.
I didn't see that. I didn't know that. That's great. And you've created an amazing brand over the years. Like, I really like your taste in literature. This nostalgic classic embodiment. It's really amazing. Yeah, man. So I noticed scenes where Caleb seems to experience auditory hallucinations. Mistaken, I'm sad they're dead for I'm glad they're dead. This misperception appeared to be significant to his descent. Now, what inspired this specific manifestation of his psychological fragmentation, if that's indeed what you were portraying?
Well, it most certainly is. I wanted to explore all elements with this. Keep in mind, I'm coming off of a black and white silent film. Because I write and direct and edit all of my own films, I don't pump out a volume of films. You don't get one a year from me. It usually takes between writing and then pre-production and then production and post-production. It generally takes me between 2 to 3 years to complete a film. So, the last film was a black and white silent homage to, the early German expressionist films that I fell in love with. Films like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu and, Daughters of Darkness, Phantom Carriage, movies like that. And I thought, with Lachrymose, I really want to explore light and sound. With sound, I really wanted to explore ASMR. And because we filmed in my home, which was built in the 1950s, all hardwood floors, plaster walls, residential neighborhood with a lot of not only loud neighbors, but helicopters flying over by and just, you name it. And we were working in a very, very small home. The rooms were very tiny. By the time you did the set decorating and got the equipment in there wasn't much room to turn around or no room to really soundproof anything. So I would say probably by the third day of filming, I said, you know what, fuck it. I'm not even going to worry about trying to capture perfect sound anymore. Once the movie wraps, we're going to go into the studio. I've spent my life as a musician, and I said, we're going to do ADR once the movie's completed, and once I have it all edited together. And I think that, my principal actors were really horrified by that. What do you mean? I said, well, I have a giant flat screen TV. Once the movie's edited, we're going to go into the studio, and you're going to completely do your dialogue all over, and we're going to record it to what you see on the screen. And it worked out really good, and that also gave me a lot of freedom. So all the Foley effects that you hear in Lachrymose, everything from creaky doorknobs, silverware, footsteps, every sound that you hear in that film, I personally put in post-production.
Oh, wow.
And that really gave me a lot of room to experiment with noise and with sound, and the voices in Caleb's head, and Annie when she first appears before Caleb, and her voice kind of gets like this ethereal, demonic, ghostly voice. I really got to play with putting some effects on her voice, and it was so much fun.
Yeah, amazing. So Annie's ghostly presence struck me as one of the most powerful elements in the film. And can you walk us through the technical and emotional process of creating these apparition sequences and working with young actress Chloe Roos to achieve that otherworldly quality?
Well, I mean, that was honestly one of the most thrilling parts of the film. And it's a side story, keep in mind. Yeah, I was on a podcast several months back, and the host said, now that you mention it, because I had brought up the fact that this movie is a ghost story, but the ghost story is actually a subplot, which is unusual. You know what I mean? Because usually when you see a film that revolves around a haunting, that's the primary, template for the film, whereas this was kind of just a side story that really helped propel Caleb's downfall. But working with Annie was really, really fun. And the fact that I didn't want to use any special effects as far as CGI. I wanted to do everything practical. And so we basically, I went back and drew inspiration from the early silent films, especially Phantom Carriage, that does it so brilliantly with the ghost carriage and the horses, is that I dual and or triple layered the film. So, in other words, I would put the camera on a tripod and I would just film an empty room. And let that roll for like 3 minutes, and then I would put Chloe in and have her do her thing, and then I would film that, and then I would overlap the layers of film and change the opacity so that she had that ghostly, ethereal, effervescence. So it was a whole lot of fun to be able to pull that off. And then of course, there was a lot of tricks where we did some reverse in post. We did some reverse on the films where it looked like objects were flying out of the room, and so it was just a lot of fun.
Wow, you put a lot of work and blood, sweat, and tears into this. That's amazing. So I was drawn to the period setting with vintage typewriters and rotary phones. Now, what attracted you to this specific aesthetic, and how does it serve the psychological landscape of Caleb's mind?
Well, again, that's a reoccurring theme in all of my films. I've never showed any modern technology. I don't really like much that's contemporary.
Yeah.
And I thought that, with this film, I wanted it to kind of have a nondescript look, per se. Like, when you take out all contemporary elements and somebody's just left to rotary phones on the walls, electric typewriters, this could be set in the 1980s, it could be set in the 70s, it could be, and it takes place in the Catskills. So there's not a lot of amenities that, in other words, and for those that see the film, you probably picked up on this, we showcase every season in the film so that this story of Caleb's downfall transpires over the course of an entire year. There's fall, summer, winter, spring, all encapsulated within the film. And imagine being Elizabeth, who is more or less held hostage by her husband, and she doesn't have modern day technology such as cell phone that she can just text some easily get away, and where Caleb keeps her under thumb where he can watch and undermine every move she makes. So if she goes to the phone, he's well aware of it, and he can keep her in this personal hell that he has created.
I think that's what makes those a lot more scarier too, is the vintage landscape. Because if we had modern technology, then a lot of these psychological thrillers really couldn't work. Yeah, so I totally understand that. And that actually leads me to the next part, because you said that it lasted through about a whole year that this was happening. And I noticed recurring dinner scenes that seem to anchor the narrative amidst the chaos. Like, what significance do these domestic moments hold within the story's exploration of trauma and madness?
Well, I really enjoy the first story a lot because it really shows... Well, again, I like to show juxtaposition. So you have the tense moments with Caleb. He just lost his flowers, and he's not really in the greatest mood. And you can just tell from the opening sequence that there's something problematic between him and his wife. In the opening narration, when Caleb says, "What defines okay?" To my wife, Elizabeth, okay means forgetting past traumas and moving on.
Yeah.
And I can't remember verbatim, but then he says something to me where he says something, and I can't remember verbatim, despite the fact that I wrote it, but more or less, that for him, okay comes in intervals. As having a cigarette, a sip of whiskey. For him, okay was just temporary. So he's setting it up to where he's already has this grudge against his wife, and that he can't understand why she doesn't take things as personally as he's taking what's happening in their life. And so there's this tension in the opening dinner scene. And when you watch it, there's this, you get the impression that because he was a one-time best-selling author, that at one time they were a bit well-to-do socialites, and now they've lost everything because Caleb's now washed up, lost his career over everything. And but she's listening to the opera music, and you have this. Don't want to give anything away, but a very impactful moment happens during that scene where Caleb does snap, and I just like again the juxtaposition between you have this beautiful, opera music, and then you have Caleb just losing it in the midst of all of that. So that was substantial, and then later on, the dinner scenes just represent Caleb trying to have some type of normal life. He's gone over the edge, but he still has to eat like the rest of us, and he's going about things. But while he's having these dinners, he's realizing there's fragments that are missing from his actual life, and he doesn't know
how to handle that.
How to handle it, or when he lost. When he lost the elements, the focal elements that were in his life, and so he's trying to come to terms. So it's just it's just somebody that over the course of the year trying to go through their normal life, eating and just going about their daily activities and trying to cope.
Just struggling, just like really struggling.
Yeah.
So to me, there's a fascinating duality in how Caleb confronts versions of himself. Almost like his psyche is fracturing into judged and being judged. And what were you trying to convey about the nature of guilt and self-loathing through these confrontations?
I think I was just trying to explore something that we probably all struggle with. I think at one point in time, we are our own worst critics. And I guess I just feel like, as far as Caleb goes, he felt as though he was his own judge, jury, and executioner to some extent.
Yeah.
But then again, he was also such a narcissist that, he would have these moments, where he would beat himself up and he would remember the man that he once was before the spiral. And but then by the same token, he has it's almost as though he has split personality. And I think we can clearly see that, where on one hand, sometimes he truly does blame himself, and he has moments of clarity. Yeah. But then there's other moments where the narcissistic side comes through, and he puts all the blame on his wife, and she's the catalyst for everything wrong that has happened in their relationship.
God, yeah, I felt the dread. I could feel it. You did a great job actually getting the audience involved in the dread itself. The visual motif of flower petals appears throughout the film. Could you explain the symbolism behind this recurrent image and how it connects to the title and broader themes?
Yeah, it really, a lot of it just depends on the scene in which we're speaking of. With the flowers being such a close tie and a connection to his daughter Annie, who's now deceased, the flowers were everything to Caleb. Therefore, they had to be everything in this film. And there's moments where he might be having a manic episode where I won't say much. We'll just say there's a scene in the backyard with an axe, and that's all I'm going to say. But then we see the petals start to come down from the sky, and almost with that, if you really dive into the psyche of that scene. Again, a lot of that scene and his anger in that scene is just directed towards. It's trying to skirt around without giving.
Oh, I totally understand, and I know why. Because
it makes it
not to cut you off, but that was crazy. That was crazy. Like whenever you told me we need to be careful about something, something spoiling the ending or whatever like that. Like, after watching the film, like, I really understood what you meant, because I was, like, totally caught off guard. I was totally thrown off guard. I did not expect that. So, yeah, that's why I wrote these questions in a way to where we can, like, you know, really get your perspective on it, but without revealing anything. And it's just, it was kind of the art itself.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, that was the other thing too about this film is I just really wanted to give it an art house vibe, much like Noctambulous, where, you know, I mean, with Noctambulous, I've had some people say almost every frame was set up like a piece of art, and so it's difficult when you're working on micro-budget films. It's not like we're Del Toro, where we have, you know, all this money to really make things look as beautiful as we'd like them to make, but when you're working on a micro budget and you're trying to work with a film that you want to have an artistic, you know, nature to it, because that's always been my vision as a director, is I want everything to have some type of artistic touch to it. And you know, I feel like I was really pleased, you know, with the way that Lachrymose turned out on such a micro scale budget. So
okay.
But you mentioned the art of it all, and that's really how I approached this film. I wanted it to be terrifying, but I wanted it to be artistic, and trying to just...
Yeah, you succeeded in that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you shot this film in your own home during the pandemic with a skeleton crew. Now, how did those constraints ultimately shape the atmosphere of the film? Were there creative breakthroughs that came directly from these limitations?
I don't know if the creative breakthroughs happened because of the limitations, but the one thing that I always convey to my actors, and I feel very blessed to be able to have cast both Tedd Bodnar, who played Caleb McCallum, and Michelle Mullins, who played Elizabeth, is that I expressed to them going into this that while I have a distinct vision for this film, I also like my actors to have the freedom to put themselves into their characters. So, for example, Tedd Bodnar is a complete method actor. I mean, I could not have had a better Caleb on set. What you see out of Tedd, 99, actually 110% of the time, is just a complete wild man being one of the best method actors that I have ever seen in my life. And there were times where I actually had to turn away from the scene. And, you know, I'm standing behind the camera and I'm watching what he's doing. And, you know, I told him, I said, as long as you convey the majority of what needs to be conveyed, I don't care what you add with, whether it's a physical element or whether it's a verbal element, because it makes it seem more real. So there were scenes I'm watching Caleb and I'm watching Tedd, and I had to turn my back because I just had the biggest grin on my face, like, holy fuck, what am I witnessing right now? Like, this is madness. And I didn't want to mess him up, you know, so I would turn my head and not look. And, you know, it was the same with Elizabeth. She was more scripted. She knew her words and her lines going into it. And so that was different in a different manner. But both of them, I said, if you have any ideas, pitch them to me. Because I'm all about, let's try everything while we're here. While the cameras are rolling, let's try everything. If it doesn't work, we won't use it. But maybe we'll stumble upon something that is absolutely brilliant that wasn't in the script. So when you allow your actors to have that type of freedom, and it really, and I mean, believe me, I've worked with directors before as an actor. I've missed one small little word that didn't change anything with the delivery, and the director would be like, "Cut, go back and do it again. You missed this little insignificant word." It's like, you know,
one more, go again.
Are the director's egos so big? You know what I mean? Because the performance was great, and if one little tiny word that doesn't change anything, it's like, no, who cares? You know, I care about the end result, and I care about coming across as natural. And as far as I was concerned, working with Tedd and Michelle, they're just complete pros that really made everything that I had written on paper come across very natural and realistic. So.
It is better to have more than not enough. So I totally understand what you mean about just having them just go with it, and whatever we can use, we use. Whatever we can't, we can't. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, they always say that directors should not edit their own films, and I understand where that old adage comes from. However, I think what I'm able to separate, and the reason why they say that is because most of the time, writers and directors become so attached to a scene that even if it doesn't work, they can't help but still stick it in the movie.
Yeah.
Whereas I will cut anything. I have no attachment at all. I'm like, let's film everything, then let's film even more if people have ideas. And I've actually told my actors, don't get attached to a scene, because you might be disappointed in the final cut, because if it doesn't work, I'm cutting it. I have no emotional attachment to anything. And so also as the editor, going into the final process of editing, you want as much footage as possible, because you don't want to find out that, shit, I'm 20 minutes short on this film and we didn't get enough. So always shoot more than you need.
Okay, that's great advice. So we have about 9 minutes left, so we'll do about 2 more questions, then we'll wrap up. So the character of Amanda introduces an intrigue and dynamic that shifts the narrative. Now, without revealing too much, could you discuss what her character represents within the thematic framework of the film? Because I know she's part of the twists. I don't know if
You're
you want.
talking about Amanda, you said. Not
Yeah,
Elizabeth.
Amanda. Yeah, not Elizabeth. Amanda appeared at the doorway at first, and then she came around later, and then there was something that happened with her.
Yes, that actually all happened during the conversion from, converting from short story format to a screenplay, because in the original short story it was just Caleb and Elizabeth.
Okay.
But then I felt that, okay, you know what? As a screenplay, we need to bring in some type of antagonist to this story, somebody that's going to throw things off even more, because if we just kept it between Caleb and Elizabeth, there's really only one or two ways in which
exactly.
And when you throw a third person into the mix, you're like, okay, what's going on?
What's happening?
And there's a very subtle scene that I'm not sure if you picked up on or if anybody else watching will, but I believe it's right before the second dinner scene, and Caleb's talking to Elizabeth as she's preparing. And he's looking out the window, and he's just asking her, like, so, what do you think about our new neighbor? And he's trying to get a feel for Elizabeth into if she's keen on anything, and that's all I'll say. I'll leave it at that. So he's putting little figures out there, and then, kind of deflecting and saying, I'm not sure I really trust her. Every time I wait to her, talk to her, she doesn't really look me in the eye.
Yeah.
And so that's really a whole setup to what will later transpire near the end of the movie. So, I guess without saying a whole lot, I mean, we can admit Amanda's a backstabber, and I think that all of us, unfortunately, have brought somebody to our inner circle who we thought we could trust, who had ulterior motives, and that's Amanda's character.
Yeah. All right. So I found the sound design remarkable, particularly in how it seems to place us inside of Caleb's mind. What was your approach to creating the film's soundscape, and how did you use audio elements to blur the line between reality and delusion?
I mean, honestly, that film created itself. I had an entirely different idea for sound going into it compared to once we filmed. And then we had to do ADR, and I had to add in the Foley effects, and then in post-production, it kind of just started developing itself, which was fascinating. As somebody that, Tedd has described me as a complete control freak, to an extent, you know what I mean? He's like, you're so OCD with everything that sometimes you're afraid to just, but again, with that, I give my actors a lot of freedom, so I'm not that OCD, but, it's funny for somebody like me with OCD that's so meticulous to be able to let something start to shape itself and just see where it goes. That's a very fascinating thing.
Having it shape itself.
I have no idea, where this is going or how it's turning out. But I like the direction, and then the more it goes, the more it just starts to envelop you, and you're like, this is kind of the direction. So a lot of little happy accidents and little things might happen that kind of nudge you into a certain direction, and you kind of have to go with it at that point. So that was really fun for me. You
let the story write itself. Yeah, I gotcha. So you've mentioned Lachrymose Primrose is being adapted into a graphic novel. Now, how does translating this story to a visual but static medium allow you to explore different aspects of Caleb's psychological state?
So obviously I have a lot more freedom to get crazy with the graphic novel because I'm not bound by monetary constraints. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah, no, for sure.
It's like I could just get completely wild with the illustrations if I want to, and be able to pull off things that, you know, a micro-budget filmmaker cannot successfully pull off because you don't have the funds to do that. So it's been a lot of fun really exploring the story through a graphic novel. It's going to be right now, maybe set to be a 2-part, but I'm thinking that as we go into it, it's probably going to be a 3 volumes set. I think that, like the first volume is so large, and when I followed the timeline of the film, we're probably only about 35 to 38 minutes into the film, and that's enough to already fill up 1 volume of the graphic novel.
Yeah.
So I'm saying there's going to be at least 3 volumes,
That'd be great.
possibly even 4.
That's amazing. I can't wait. I will definitely pick up a copy for sure.
I think everybody will be really, especially if anybody out there loves comic books and graphic novels. This is really, it's wow. It's really a lot of fun.
All right. So looking back now on the film, what aspect of Lachrymose Primrose are you most proud of, and what do you hope audiences will take away from this experience? And then what comes next? This will be the last question. And then what comes next after this film for you?
So what are my favorite?
Yeah, like what aspects of the film are you most proud of, and like what really sticks out, like and like
for
how
me, it was probably all the narrative parts for Caleb. You know, being an author and a writer for all these years, and really getting to write Caleb's either inner monologue or his narrative bits. Like those are pieces where I'm like, you know, those were really meaningful for me as a writer to really work those into the story. You know, I mean, the whole experience was great, but honestly, I mean, I'm just very thankful and feel blessed to work with everybody that I worked with, from Chloe Ruth, who played Annie, to, you know, Tedd Bodnar, Michelle Mullins. I'm very thankful for my assistant, Bernard Madison, and, you know, we really did have quite the skeleton crew during that time, but just the whole experience and the camaraderie, because I do usually keep my sets, skeleton sets, and everybody has to be like-minded, because for me it's very important that our sets stay like a family, and if somebody, for whatever reason, if their personality doesn't mesh, no matter how good they are, they can't be a part of the project. So looking back in retrospect, I mean, not only do I love the film, and you know, we had a lot of fun. I mean, the car scene was amazing, filming like towards the end of the movie, and there were so many great parts that I actually love, but I really miss being around the people, because you get used to being around the people. Probably for the course of 2 years, maybe closer to 3, you live with these people almost daily, or at least weekly, and then the film wraps, it gets released, and everybody goes back to their normal life, and so, you know, but I mean, the whole experience was amazing, so.
All right, fantastic. So JD, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. Your dedication to independent filmmaking is truly inspiring. And if you need any support with future projects or festival submissions, please don't hesitate to reach out. You know, we're always here to help talented creators like yourself bring their visions to life too. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Devon. Yeah, it's been a long time. We've probably known each other. Let's see, my career goes back 15 years now. We probably met maybe 2 or 3 years into my career, so we've known each other for quite some time. We had lost contact or correspondence. I'm not really a big social media person. I don't do I mean, more so on Instagram than Facebook, but I've really become a recluse over the years, intentionally, just because I'm so focused on working on the current project that I wake up at 4 a.m. and I literally work on it till 8, 9 o'clock at night, and then I crash out, and I don't really spend a whole lot of time.
Well, it's truly inspiring. I've definitely drawn some inspiration from your works as well, and it's great. It was great chatting with you. I am looking forward to our next conversation, for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Devon. I appreciate it. It's been an honor to be on the show and speak to your listeners.
Yeah, we'll chat soon, man. All right, that was absolutely fascinating. J.D. Ellenberger, thank you for sharing your creative process and the deeply personal journey behind Lachrymose Primrose. Your commitment to independent filmmaking and your unique artistic vision are truly inspiring. For our viewers, Lachrymose Primrose is currently available through festival screenings, with wider distribution coming soon. Be sure to follow J.D. Ellenberger's work through his social media and website for updates on the graphic novel adaptation and future projects. This has been another episode of the Indie Film Network, where we celebrate the voices that push the boundaries of cinema. Remember, the IFN app will soon be available to industry professionals and creators, furthering our mission to develop frameworks that preserve artistic integrity while embracing new possibilities in filmmaking. At the Indie Film Network, we believe in celebrating voices like Ellenberger's, creators who pursue their vision with passion and perseverance despite the challenges of independent filmmaking. I thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next week with another conversation about the art and craft of independent filmmaking in 2025 and beyond. Have a good night, everyone.